Hey, I'm Sven Masterson, one of the co-founders and mentors in the Mentoring Men community, and I show men how to transform painful, highly conflicted relationships into pleasurable, deeply connected relationships. And in this video, I want to talk to you about authenticity and sacrifice, and when to know how and when the conditions are such that we should make a sacrifice, when we shouldn't, and how to navigate these very complex waters in a relationship. You know, most of the men that reach out to me, I'd say about 90% of them, would fit the definition of a nice guy. Now, I'm referring to Dr. Robert Glover's book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. And one of the problems with nice guys is nice guys tend to feel like they have to do a lot of things. And actually, they make a lot of sacrifices in life, more than the most average person on the planet. The thing is, the sacrifices they make are not genuine. You see, they're actually calculating. They're making what Glover calls a covert contract, where if I do this thing, if I sacrifice in this way, there'll be some sort of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There's going to be a reward. And usually that reward is some sort of trade. It's transactional. If I give you sacrifice, I expect things like respect, admiration, appreciation, value, worth, significance, love, sex, intimacy. The list goes on and on and on. This is how a nice guy thinks. And so a nice guy is very accustomed to making these sacrifices, which are no sacrifice at all. They're actually transactions, and the commerce, or the currency rather, is sacrifice, and the sacrifice is given in exchange for some sort of commodity. And it makes the things that we want commoditized. Now, one of the challenges when a man has lived this way is that as he discovers this part of himself that is highly manipulative, very controlling, very dark, and very inauthentic, that he has an awakening and says, wow, I have not been a good man. I've been a nice guy, and I need to stop being inauthentic. I need to actually let my yeses be yes and my no be no. I need to stop saying I want to do things that I don't want to do, and stop saying I don't want to do things that I do want to do. And what this nice guy is experiencing is an awakening of sorts. He's awakening to this highly manipulative, covert contract way of being. So, unfortunately, what most nice guys do in this growth process, and maybe it's not fair to call it unfortunate, it's just a natural part of growing away from being a nice guy, is that pendulum swings from this kind of weak, collapsing, like self-sacrificing martyrdom way of being, and it swings the other way, and a man grows cold. And he's not doing this intentionally, he's just trying to figure this out. He says, well, I don't want to be the guy who says yes to things he doesn't really mean. And so someone in his life, usually a partner, requests something from him in a relationship. And the partner is making sometimes a very sincere, legitimate, and vulnerable request for some form of support. And the nice guy, being accustomed to feeling what he feels in his responses, his reactions, and he notices, well, I don't want to do that. And he doesn't want to be a nice guy, so he says no to a request for support. And this creates more friction in the relationship, because what has happened is that pendulum has swung from being dishonest and disingenuous to now being very honest and very genuine, but confused about the difference between the sources that a man can use to execute on things like sacrifice. I would suggest that from my experience with myself and from countless men, that we have two things going on inside of us, two parts of us. And in the Mentoring Men community, in our really deep mentoring experience called the Renewed Masculine Man, we symbolize this as being heart and brain. And what we're doing in that dichotomy of sorts is we're understanding that within our inner dialogue, we have these two voices, and these two voices are oftentimes very at odds with each other. The brain's voice tends to look outward. It looks at what other people are doing It looks to the future. It's everything but present. And it is really where our lower desires come from. You might say, well, why? Well, our brain is an organ dedicated to our survival, our comfort, and the conservation of calories. It's really quite pragmatic. And so our brain is just kind of evaluating prospects of the future and saying, does that look like it's going to be imperative for my survival? No. Is it going to be imperative for my comfort? No. Is it going to conserve calories? No, or yes. And so these desires that come from this lower part of ourself tend to be non-virtuous, but they're not good or bad. They just are. It's kind of like if you try to use your laptop to guide your life. You know, laptops are very handy. They have a lot of calculation capacity. They have storage capacity. They can perform some wonderful things. But what they don't have is the human characteristics that transcend that stuff. They don't have wisdom. They don't have virtue. They don't have these parts of us that are existential in nature that seem to transcend for, the human biological experience. And that stuff, in our community, we orient into the symbol of the heart. Now, you could also synonymize that with spirit or consciousness. We don't really get hung up on terms. We use this heart and brain metaphor so that we have a way to talk about what is this bifurcated, dualistic experience within ourselves, where we have one part of us, we like to say, that thinks this, and another part of us that says that. Now, if you don't believe that this two-partness is a thing, I want you to start looking at your own speech and how often you say, well, one part of me, or in the back of my head, you know, we're actually really accustomed as humans to talking this way. And I think it's self-evidential then that we have conflicting narratives within us. And so I like to see these narratives as being higher desires, the ones from the heart, spirit, consciousness, and the ones that are lower, that are in the pragmatism, survival, animalistic nature of the brain. And what happens with nice guys is that in their story of life, they encounter early in life some judgment of themselves, some shame. They start to create dependency on other people because they don't know what it's like to feel whole. They don't know what it's like to feel valuable and worthy and respected and appreciated. And so they need to get these, or they learn to get these sensations from what other people think about them. That's outward. See the brain in use there? And they're having, they learn all these manipulative tactics to do this kind of commercial, transactional way of relating that is what ultimately lends to the conflict that happens in the relationship. And that's when I meet these men. And when they come to places like the Mentoring Men community, what they're really discovering is this way of being has not worked. They don't feel the things they want to feel. I'm usually meeting them when they're between 35 and 55, and they're saying to themselves, look, time is running out. I need to find this life I know my heart says is out there, but I can't seem to find it. I'm not happy. I'm not enjoying life. My wife or partner is disconnected from me. She's asking for space. Maybe a man's in a sexless relationship or just woefully unhappy. And what's happening is he's running into the natural fruit of having a commercialized, transactional relationship with a human being. And this way of being, this brain orientation to living, which is very future focused, it's very outward focused, is failing. And so, like I mentioned, he comes in and he appreciates books like Dr. Glover's, and he has an epiphany that he's been this way, and yet he doesn't really know what to do. He stops the covert contracts, but he also doesn't yet know how to say yes to some things from this higher part of himself. And so when he's requested in some way by a partner, hey, can you support me in some way? And it is a way that is uncomfortable. He worries. Well, if I say yes, even though I don't want to, am I being inauthentic? Won't that violate these things I'm learning? Won't that make me a nice guy? And this is a high conflict area for him. He doesn't know how to navigate it. So I want to offer this man some suggestions. How do you navigate this space? Well, the first thing I would would encourage this man with is, good job noticing that you're at a crossroads where in the past you would have gone down this manipulative, transactional, giving to get kind of way of being. Good job, because that is a necessary first step in recognizing this way of being and moving in another direction. And so now what you need to begin to do is to notice that when somebody requests something of you, you have two ways to respond. And even though you might have a brain impulse to not do something you find uncomfortable or just not interesting, something that's not your desire, your brain has a very clear reason for not doing that. And those reasons will usually be oriented around your brain has a desire to stay comfortable, to conserve calories, and to really only do what's necessary for your survival or extreme pleasure in the form of dopamine. And so when we think about something a partner asks us to do, like, hey, would you go to the mall shopping for 4 hours while I look for an important dress for an important occasion? A lot of guys are going to say, that's not interesting to me at all. And there are times where saying, no, I'm not really interested in that, is the virtuous thing to do. But let's suppose your spouse or partner is really experiencing a lot of emotional upheaval, and she asks you to support her through a difficult conversation or maybe a visit with somebody that she has a lot of anxiety and fear about. And you look at that too and you say, oh no, that family, that's a train wreck. It's high drama. I'm not interested in that. But yet you also recognize that your partner has a lot of fear. They have a lot of anxiety. They're a powerful person who can make choices and lead themselves in life on a daily basis. They're not asking you to take on responsibility for part of their life. They're asking for support, and a request for support is different than a request for, will you be responsible for this part of my life, for dependency. And so it's in these moments that the nice guy has to learn or to look within himself and say, do I have a higher value reason to say yes to this? And it's difficult because we have to recognize that this lower nature of us might not have a desire to do it at all. It might be something that looks like no fun whatsoever. But there might be a higher virtuous reason to do it. And that is rooted in a different kind of love that is kind of unknown to a lot of nice guys, at least in the relationship, because they haven't really practiced this a lot. This is what the Greeks called agape love. In our community, we call this an unconditional high regard. And it is this virtuous way of deciding to be, not because of a partner's behavior or because of our impulses in our body dictate or say, yeah, this is a good thing, but something deeper within ourselves says, I want to do this because it's who I love to be in the world. Now, sorting through these voices can be a little bit like taking hair out of bubble gum. It can be very complicated to parse our inner dialogue. And so I've noticed kind of a few themes that I would share with you that can help a man sort it out. And if you want to go deeper into this, I would highly encourage you to reach out to us, talk to us about the Renewed Masculine Man Experience, which is a 6-month deep dive course into really understanding this inner dialogue and mastering these kind of decision makings. It's perfect for a man who's lived as a nice guy and has no idea how to live outside of a nice guy territory without being an asshole. And so this guy, what are you going to do? How do you know how to sort this out? One of the first and most effective questions I ask myself, and I encourage clients to ask themselves, is, well, who do I love to be? Who do I love to be despite other people's behavior? What really strikes and resonates a deep chord within me that feels virtuous, that feels noble, that feels high character, that feels like it accomplishes good in the world? That's a great way to start connecting with our deeper desires that would drive us to do sometimes sacrificial things, but not for getting some sort of reward from someone else, but for experiencing the delight that it is as a man to live out of that kind of virtue and value system. That's the reward. And a man, when he connects with this part of himself, this king, warrior, magician, lover within, he feels good. It feels right and true. Even if on the outside it feels scary, it feels like it's going to be uncomfortable, this deeper part of us says, but I'm still a yes. And so this man is not feeling like, oh, I can't wait to go do this supporting thing. In fact, he could still recognize that he has an aversion and a disinterest, but something deeper, this heart or spirit or consciousness, is compelling him to say yes, to make the decision and do it because of this deeper part of himself and the value system that is within there. Now, a lot of men get so up in their head in life that they have lost touch with this part of themselves. They started to live in a very pragmatic way. You know you're doing this if you walk around telling yourself that you feel like a chameleon. You know you're living in your head if you actually have a different way of being with different people. If you're constantly thinking about what other people are thinking about, including what they're thinking about you, you're a man that lives in your head, and you're not actually dialed in to this deeper part of yourself, your heart. And if that's you, I'd like you to reach out to me. What else can you look at? What are some other tells? Well, the brain is thinking about the future. That's its job. Its job is to scan the future and to look for, based on the brain's understanding, what looks like a threat to our survival, our comfort, and our calories, right? And so the brain is always saying, that's not going to be worth it. And again, it's not being bad here. That's its job. But a lot of times it is going to be at odds with your value system. Now, a man's heart can also look to the future, but it's not looking at the future to protect himself from it. It's looking at the future in a terraforming way. What do I want my future to look like? What kind of future do I want to create? And so this is another tell of the heart. The heart is a creating mechanism. The brain is a defending mechanism. And so when I'm up in my head, I'm kind of in protecting mode. I'm looking around for threats. I'm looking around for things that feel scary, and I'm trying to avoid them. Whereas this deeper part of us, our higher nature, is looking around with a desire to not to collapse and protect, but to expand and flourish and create. And so one of the things we could do is just kind of get dialed into our inner dialogue. What feels like expansive to me as a man? What feels like it creates good in my environment, in the world? And what does that part of me want to do here? And this is how you begin to get dialed into your heart, to awaken that part of us that tends to get muted in childhood and stays muted into adulthood until we experience a high level of conflict that gives us the opportunity to start having these conversations. And that's, again, when I meet men. So, future focus is the brain. Collapsing and defending is the brain. Thinking about comfort is the brain. The heart, thinking about expansion, creation. Not altogether concerned with comfort, because this is a transcendent part of us. It's the part of us that says, yes, the gym is not going to feel good today, but I value a life where I feel whole and strong and fit and healthy. And so I'm going to go to the gym today. I'm going to get after it because I have a value to do that. You see the difference? And so this is the kind of conversation we need to have when it comes to sacrifice. Now, another way we can know if we're up in our head or in our heart is your brain is always looking at things from a return on investment scenario. If I do the work, what is the reward? Your heart, I would suggest, is not looking for that. You know why? Because your heart, this spiritual conscious part of you, it doesn't really need anything. It's not at risk from anyone outside. It doesn't gain something that it doesn't have because it's already whole and complete. I'm already a whole human being on my inside. So are you. So is every human on the planet. And so I don't need something from you, nor you I, to be more. You're already enough. And so this part of me isn't asking questions like, what do I get out of it? It's instead saying, who am I? Who do I love to be? What does that authentic, deep part of me want to do here? What does it love to do? And so that can also serve us. Now, I can't possibly share with you in one video what usually takes 6 months to unpack. But I hope this has given you at least a place to start with understanding this, that your inside dialogue has two parts, that it can be very complicated, and that you can actually sacrifice in a virtuous way. You can do things that you don't want to do without being a nice guy. And I would suggest to you that in a long-term relationship, it's essential that you live this way, that your partner is going to become quite calloused and disconnected and cold in response to you if you shut this part of you off. And yet it's also difficult to learn how to do for former nice guys. And so if that is challenging for you, if you'd like to know more how to navigate this space, I want to invite you to do one of two things, whichever thing feels a little bit easier and more approachable to you. If you want to jump right in the deep end of the pool, I would request that you reach out to me and request a free complimentary session where we talk about these things. I'm not going to spend 60 or 90 minutes trying to sell you on working with me or coming into our community. I don't need to do that. I'm going to spend 60 to 90 minutes talking to you about this. We're going to talk about your specifics. And it's going to be one of the deepest conversations you've ever had with a man. I promise. I promise. We hear this all the time. Now, all you got to do that is to click the link in the description below, and you'll find a place where you can request to have a conversation with myself or one of the other mentors in our community and talk about that stuff. If that feels like that's a little bit vulnerable and real, it's a little too much of the deep end of the pool, then I want to invite you to reach out in another link below and just explore some of the free courses we have in our community. Those courses are not sales funnels. They're not like, hey, let's get them in there and sell and pressure. They are just what we say they are. They're free video series in a safe and private environment where you can ask questions, and our mentors and our apprentices can respond to them. You can maybe do things that feel a little bit too sheepish about, saying in a YouTube comment, and you can explore these subjects a little bit more. Now, these free courses are not massively deep. They're introductory level, but they're a great way to do the next thing. And you can find the link for that below also. And with that, I'll wish you the best as you navigate this complex environment of trying to figure out how and when to sacrifice without being a nice guy. And I hope to see you soon. Take care.